All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is our first webinar. We're very excited. We're going to, see, I'm going to start out by sharing a slideshow with you, talking about composting. And we've already gotten a lot of questions and comments. So I hope to answer some of those during the presentation. But if I don't get to yours, we'll have a question and answer session at the end. A few things before we get started is we have you all on mute. So if you do have a question, just go to chat and do that. We have Alma who's kind of taking note of all of those. So if I don't answer, she'll ask me. But if I still don't answer, then, get on and let me know. All right, let's get started. All right. Can everybody see that slide, Alma? Can you get off mute and let me know if you see that, the slide?
No, not yet.
No? Oh, okay. I need to do something. Okay, here we go. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Let me see here. Now, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, super. Okay, so get started again. This is Introduction to Composting, and we're the Compost Queens. We're in San Antonio, Texas, and we're a curbside composting service. We've been in business about 3 years. Very excited to be doing it. We collect food scraps from from residents and businesses, and we process it and take it to local farms. So let's get to what composting is. So plants need living soil with minerals, and the soil that is in my front yard when I moved here is really just dirt. It's not living. So it needs organisms, little microbes, to grow and be healthy. So that's what compost is. It's decaying organic matter that provides billions and billions of diverse living organisms that work together to make the nutrients in the soil accessible to the plants. So unless you add organic matter, your soil is not really able to feed the whatever you're going to plants very well. So that is why we do it. So here's 2 pictures of soil. On the left is soil that's been compacted. And if you can see what soil is made of is sand, silt, and clay, which are just different types of soil. And without feeding it, it's got 10% air, 15% water, and 1% organic matter. So your plants need the air and the water and the organic matter, which helps them grow healthy. So once you start composting, the ratio changes quite a bit. It's just 30% sand, silt, and clay. The air goes way up to 40% air, and the water is 30%, which we'll talk about water retention and air pockets, how the compost helps with that. And then the 10% is the soil with organic matter. So why should you bother composting? One, It will make your soil healthy, which will make your plants healthy, which will make anything that eats the plants, animals, and us healthy, which will make healthy communities. And it's really amazing what healthy soil does for our planet, which we'll get into that a little bit during this webinar. And if anyone's interested, let us know, and we'll get into it a little deeper in a future webinar. So it improves soil structure and adds nutrients. So with clay soil, clay is compacted, so there's really virtually little to no air in there, and the water can't get through. So when you compost the clay soil, it improves the drainage and the air pockets. And on the other end of the spectrum is sand, which there's lots of air. The water will go right through it. It's not retained, so the plants don't really get to use it. And there's very little organic matter. So the sandy soil, they improve where you can, they retain more water and the nutrient holding capacity. And then the middle picture, of course, is the healthy soil. And as you can see, the roots of the plants are very fine, and they help build an ecosystem where there's an exchange of all the nutrients from the soil to the plants and back to the soil to the microbes. It keeps them living. So just like you have to feed yourself to stay healthy, you have to feed the soil. And the microbes, the living organisms, they help the plant access the minerals and other nutrients in the soil. So adding compost strengthens plants actually against disease and pests. The weaker your plants are, the more susceptible they are to both disease and pests. It also will help clean the soil. It'll get a lot of pollution out of the soil when the soil is healthy, and it really helps water retention. So soil that's compacted, the water will not get through. On the left, you can see it either pools or it just runs off and causes erosion. So healthy soil is like a sponge. It will it will retain the water so that the plants will get it as they need it. And you can see it has the air pockets in there as well. This is pretty exciting. So this is on a larger scale. So food that goes into, that you throw away, it goes into a landfill and emits a lot of methane, which is a really strong greenhouse gas, and carbon dioxide. So it reduces that because if you don't put it in the landfill, you put it back into the soil, it doesn't release the methane. And the carbon, we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but the healthy soil and the plants growing in it, they actually suck the carbon dioxide out of the air and put it to where it builds healthy plants and healthy soil. Okay, so let's get to different methods of composting. We're going to start with the tumbler, which probably most of you are familiar with. And it's an easy, as far as low labor type of composting method. It's for only if you have a very limited amount of organic matter would this work for you. And basically what you do is, we'll talk about the ratios. Well, we're going to talk about it. When you're building compost, a pile, or in the tumbler to a smaller degree, you want 3 parts of carbon material, which is, we'll get to that, and 1 part nitrogen. Let me see if I can find that. No. Okay, so carbon is anything that's dry, like leaves, wood chips, mulch, hay. And the nitrogen source is anything that when it's breaking down, it gets slimy, So basically your food waste and things like that. Now, let me see if I can get back. Hold, bear with me a minute. Okay, so with the tumbler method, you're going to put, ideally, you're going to put 3 parts carbon to every 1 part nitrogen. You're going to need air and water, just like the healthy soil needs it. So most tumblers come with holes drilled in them, and they're on a stand that you can tumble them. So that will mix them up and get air and moisture to them. However, if it's in your composted in there a long time, which happens to most people that I know that use a tumbler, it will get dried out. So you may have to add water. And when you add the water, you don't want to soak it. You want to add enough so that it's as wet as a sponge that's been squeezed out is. Okay, then we have trench compost, which is a static type of composting. So it's basically you just dig a ditch and throw in your organic matter, and it will decompose. It takes a while, but it will decompose and feed the soil, and it's very low maintenance. Okay, then we have the hot composting, some hot composting methods. We have a 3-bin method, and probably most people are familiar with that. That's traditionally what we think of as composting in the States is the traditional kind. Again, you're going to want to layer 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. You want a variety of different size materials like twigs, stalks, straw, hay. That with the different sizes, you're going to create more air pockets, which is what's going to help it heat up. Which the heat in the compost bin like this, or the Berkeley method, which we'll get to, is what helps decompose. And adding the different variety of materials will also increase the air and oxygen exchange every time you turn the pile. So you're gonna, the optimum size of a pile is about 3 to 5 feet high. So with the 3-bin method, they have 3 bins so that you start your compost pile in 1 bin. So you add the 3 parts carbon to the 1 part nitrogen. And then you turn it every 2 weeks to get more oxygen in it. So you would turn it into the middle bin every couple of weeks, and that will increase the oxygen, and you'll see steam coming out of it. You should. So you'll see the heat that's decomposing the materials. Then you'll just turn it back and forth between the first 2 bins every couple of weeks. And then it takes a few months. It depends on how often you turn it. The more you turn it, the faster it decomposes and turns into compost. So once it's getting to being completely processed, you put it in the 3rd bin and be able to feed your soil. And it makes a great soil amendment. Okay. As far as the temperature, the ideal temperature for hot composting is between 130 and 170 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty hot. That's why you'll see the steam. If you're not seeing the steam, it's probably not hot enough. So you may need to add some moisture, spray it down when you turn it. You may need to turn it more so that there's more air in there. And you may not have, you may need to add either nitrogen or carbon. If it's smelling really bad, then you probably need to add more carbon. If not much is going on, then you probably need to add more nitrogen. So at the optimum heat level, 130 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll kill all the seeds. Like if you've put weeds in there, it'll kill the weed seeds, and it kills most, if not all, the pathogens. So by the time you have it completely processed, you should not have any seeds, weeds coming out of it when you put it in your garden, or any pathogens that would be harmful to the food that you're growing. If it's too hot, it'll kill the microbes, which is all the life that you need in the soil. Okay, so let's go to the Berkeley method. The Berkeley method is probably the most labor-intensive method. So the Berkeley method is pretty much the same as the 3-bin method as far as building the compost pile. But with the Berkeley method, those of you that are not patient, it will completely process your compost in about 18 days. But to do that, you have to turn it every couple of days. So that'll keep the heat up, and which will decompose it faster. So that's probably the most labor-intensive way. Okay, we did that. Okay, another way that we can compost, and this really, you can do it in a small area, but it's really needs a big area, a large area. So if you're on an acre or more, this is something you might consider. It's called hugelkultur. And hugelkultur is actually you're building a mound. And as you can see in the diagram, you start with a little trench and you add a tough woody material. And then you put some cut leaves on top of that, and then leaves and soil on top of that, and then half-rooted compost, and then topsoil or your finished compost. And then, as you can see in the bottom picture, you can cover it with hay and plant right on it. You don't have to wait for it to compost. You can plant right on it. And basically what this does is it mimics the forest floor. So it really retains the water. All of the woody matter is like a big sponge, and it retains the water and releases it in a slow time frame. Then there's vermicomposting, which my grandchildren love, which is composting with worms. Composting with worms has a couple of benefits. One, you can do it in a small space, and two, I just forgot what it does, the second one. So you can do it in a small space. We'll go with that. And so what you do is you get a container. As you can see, this is a container that one of our favorite farmers out at Talking Tree Farm built. It's just an old container and then you put a bedding down. The bedding can be straw. It can be shredded paper, any kind of a carbon source that the worms can get into. It can be coconut coir. And then you put in your worms, and the best worms for vermicomposting are called red wigglers. And you may be able to find them at a feed store in your area, or you can get them online, and they'll mail them to you. And I've done that, and it works really well. So then once you have your bedding down and your worms in, you add your organic matter. So you add all your food scraps. However, you cannot put in meat or dairy or citrus. They don't like anything very acidic, so coffee grounds would not be good to put in there. And then they just go to town and start decomposing it. And the byproduct is their worm castings, which makes an incredibly rich soil amendment. It's a very slow process, So it's something you might do if you're not in a hurry, or you might do it on the side. Like at our house, we have we do vermicomposting. We do several different kinds of composting, but it's one that it's very slow. So if you're wanting to feed your soil right away, that's probably not the method you want. And then we have black soldier flies. Black soldier flies are another one that's kind of fun for the kids, as well as great for your soil. And they actually go through a lot of organic matter in a short amount of time. So black soldier flies are very easy to do. If you put your food waste, you can just put it out in your backyard. Of course, you wouldn't want to put a lot of it because it creates a nuisance. And the black soldier flies will show up. They only show up, however, in temperature 80 degrees or higher. So they'll show up, and they don't really look like a fly. They look more like a wasp with a shiny black back. And they don't behave like a fly in that they stay right there by the food waste. So you don't have to worry about them going into your house or around your yard. They're going to stay pretty much right where the food waste is. So what they do, they don't actually help the composting process, but they lay their eggs. And then, as you can see in the right-hand corner, so the eggs become larvae, and it's the larvae that do all of the work. And I have to tell you, for such little fellows, they will go through an enormous amount of food waste in a very short amount of time. And what they leave is a good soil amendment. The other bonus for those of you that raise chickens or have other kinds of livestock is the chickens love the larva. It's like chocolate to them. For all you chocolate lovers out there, you know what I mean. And to show you how much they love it, if you go to a feed store, a lot of feed stores will sell bags of dead larvae. And when you throw it out there to your chickens, they come in a hurry. So that's another method. And the last method we're going to talk about is Bokashi, which is actually what we use with our service. And Bokashi is a very, very old method. It's actually a fermentation process. Bokashi is a Japanese word that means fermented organic matter. So it takes place in an anaerobic environment. So we give our residential clients the 5-gallon buckets and our commercial clients the 40-gallon barrels. And the key to it is keeping the air out. You think of air as the enemy. So you need to have a very tight lid on whatever container you're using. So one of the benefits, or a couple of the benefits to Bokashi, is you can do it in an apartment, a very small area. You can compost all of your solid food waste, including meat, dairy, citrus, anything that is solid. You don't want to be pouring liquids in. Then as you see on the left side picture, the jar on the top is full of what is the starter to the fermentation process. And basically it's very easy to make. You can make your own. All you need is a carbon source that is absorbent. So most people use wheat bran, which you can get in bulk online. We actually use coffee chaff because we have coffee roasters in San Antonio that throw their coffee chaff and it goes into the landfill. So we get it for free. And so it's a win-win. And I've heard of people using shredded paper as well. So there's a lot of different materials you can use. So once you get your material, your carbon source, then you take it through a fermentation process, which takes it actually takes about 4 weeks from the very start to the end. till it's fermented. And then you can use it wet or dry. So it takes very little of the Bokashi flakes to start the fermentation process. So you would basically put a handful of the flakes into your container, and then you can put in the 5-gallon bucket, you can put 4 to 5 inches of organic matter, food waste, whatever you're putting in, and then close the lid tight. And then when you're ready to add again, add some more organic matter, you just put a little bit more of the flakes in. So how do you know if it's working? Well, there's a couple of things. One, if you see a white mold, the picture in the middle, that's a great sign. That's a yeast mold. It means those microbes are really going to town. You may not see the white mold, but the other ways you can see, you should not see a dark mold, and you should not see any maggots or any other critters. If you do see a dark mold or the maggots or something, it means you're not getting the lid on tight. So you'll just have to put in more of the Bokashi flakes and get the lid back on tight. When you open your bucket, even once it's fermented, it takes 2 weeks to ferment in a airtight container. Once it's fermented and you open the bucket, it's going to look pretty much like what you put in. So as you see in that bucket, you can tell it's strawberries, eggshells, onions. However, it's we call it pre-composted. It's pre-composted. So after it's in the bucket, it's been fermenting for 2 weeks, you can do a couple of things with it. You can put it right in your garden. You can dig a trench and put it right in the garden, or you can put it on top of your soil. If you put it in the garden, you're just going to cover it with dirt or whatever dirt, whatever you've got to dig a little trench, spread it out in the trench, and then cover it with the dirt you took out of the trench. When you do that, it's very acidic because it's been fermenting. It takes 2 weeks for the fermentation, for the pH to balance so that it's not real acidic and it won't burn the roots of young plants. And then after 2 weeks, you can plant on it. So it's a really quick process. 2 weeks in your anaerobic container, 2 weeks in the soil, and you can plant on it. If you have established plants, you can put it right on the soil, on top of the soil. Like if you have fruit trees or something, you just spread it out around on top of the drip line of the fruit trees. And then you need to cover it with a heavy mulch. The reason for that is it will decompose it faster, and you won't get the smell, which will attract flies. So the bottom picture on the right is a container that we layered food waste that had been fermented, Bokashi, with mulch. And we filled that up with the food waste we collect from our restaurants in a couple of months. And once we filled it completely up, now all of that food waste had been fermenting, so it was already pre-composted. Once we filled it up and closed it off, it took just a month, 7 weeks for it to look like it does in the picture. So it's really a fast and effective way to compost. Okay, before we get to questions, I just want to give you a couple of resources. Our favorite resource is kitstheground.org, and they are just an amazing organization. And they have a couple of short videos that I will tell you blew my mind. The soil story actually blew my mind when I saw it, and the compost story. They also have a free downloadable curriculum for middle school. It's called so all you educators out there, it's the soil story curriculum. So I encourage you to look at that. If you're in San Antonio or the surrounding areas, we have a lot of local resources. We have Eco Central, Talking Tree Farm, Roots of Change, Gardopia, and the Food Policy Council. And they're all really do amazing work in San Antonio and are always open to people who want to learn. So I really encourage all of you in this area to contact those resources. And I think that is the end of our slideshow. So let me get out of that. I hope I don't knock everybody out or me out. Let me see how I get back. Bear with me once again. Let's see here. Well, maybe I don't need to get out. Am I where I need to be?
So we can still see your screen, but that's okay.
Okay, let me see if I can do it.
Well,
should we just leave it like this, or should I do something else?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
So
let's get to the questions.
Mm-hmm. So Carrie asked in the chat if you can include bones in the bucket, in the Bokashi bucket.
Yes, you can include small bones. We actually have clients who will get a roasted chicken and they'll throw the whole carcass in. Of course, the smaller the particle and the less dense, the faster it's going to compost. So like the leg bones, you'll see them quite a while after, if you start digging in your soil. You may see them a year or so later, but it's fine to have them in there. So yes, you can, any solid food waste can go in the bucket.
There was another question by Stephanie. Can you add charcoal to a compost bin? So any compost bin, can you?
That's a tricky one, Stephanie. It's a lot of the charcoal that if you get it for barbecuing, it's been treated. So you don't want to put anything like that in. But if you're talking about let's say you have charcoal from wood that you've been burning that has not been treated, yes, you can put that in your compost pot. It's a great carbon source.
So another question was you had talked about a little bit about troubleshooting compost.
Yeah.
But we were wondering, so what would you do if it's too hot, like if it's over 160 degrees?
If it's over 160 degrees, which it's rarely, if you're doing a compost pile at home, you really probably don't ever need to worry about that. But if you are, then you can just wet it down and leave it. Don't turn it. When you turn it, it adds the oxygen, which will help it heat up. Or and you can put more carbon, more of your carbon source in there.
So we had another question about like people who are living in an apartment building, and so they don't necessarily have a backyard to bury the bokashi or to do other kinds of composting methods. What would you recommend for them?
Okay, well, there's a couple of things they can do depending on how much food waste they're going to compost. The two methods that you can do in an apartment are the vermicomposting, or the bokashi. If you have plants in your apartment or you have a balcony with plants in it, you can't add a lot, but you can add some of the fermented organic matter, and you can add the worm castings. The other thing you can do, which is sort of what we do because we get so much, such large such a large volume of food waste is we donate it to community gardens in our area and local farmers, and they're always appreciative of getting someone's food waste. So I would look into organizations in your area that grow plants that might be, or if you have a food bank that has a farm, they may take it.
And Jessica is wanting to know for Bokashi, can you keep adding more material, like breaking the airtight seal until it's full? Or, how do you deal with opening it up?
Yes, that's what you need to do. Again, just think of air as the enemy. So you don't want to eat a banana, open the container and throw the banana peel in. 3 hours later, eat an apple and throw the core in. What we do and what we advise our clients to do is to have some kind of a counter composter or something that you might even put in the refrigerator where you collect it. And really, we suggest you don't open it more than once a day. Of course, the fewer times you open it, the better it'll ferment. But opening it once a day won't hurt it, as long as you get that lid on tight.
Yeah, and I would add to that, after your bucket is all the way full, we found that the best thing to do is just to maybe put some shredded paper or some kind of carbon on top, close the lid up, and then just don't touch it for 2 weeks so that it can finish fully fermenting. Carrie wants to know that with the traditional 3-bin composting, what is the resulting pH of the soil? And how long before it neutralizes? The
pH, you don't really have to worry about the pH with the 3-bin method. In fact, when the reason you worry about it with Bokashi is because it's fermented, so it's very acidic. But adding compost to your soil will actually balance your pH. So if you're in a very acidic area where the soil is very acidic, it will help bring down the acidity. And the same with alkaline soil, it will help balance it.
And then do you have any more tips for vermicomposting? Just like how much to put at a time, or how to make sure that there's nothing going wrong?
Right. So with vermicomposting, you'll know pretty quickly if you've got too much organic matter in there because it'll start smelling. So as long as it's not smelling putrid, you're okay. So what I suggest is to start out with just a little bit and then build up. And you'll be able to gauge, if you're getting the right amount in or not. Now, the other thing that I didn't mention with vermicomposting is that I know you can do it inside. However, since it is food waste in there, it'll attract other decomposers like roaches and things like that. So if you have a problem inside with those, you probably don't want to do your vermicomposting in the house.
Another question generally was from Karen. She wants to know if, what kind of equipment, I know it's going to depend on what kind of method you use, but generally equipment that you would need.
We talked about Bokashi, so you know that vermicomposting, you'll just need a container to put them in. They do sell online. There are a lot of sources for them. Special bins of different sizes that make it a lot easier to utilize all the different soil amendments that come from vermicomposting. For a pile, I suggest you get a pitchfork. It makes it a lot easier to turn it. A shovel makes it pretty difficult. So I would suggest a pitchfork. They do sell they're called biopods for, home composting with black soldier flies. So you can find those online as well. I don't know. I'm trying to think. I think that's about it. Alma, can you think of it?
Well, the things that you would need to make your own tumbler would just be like a big drum and then the wood to secure it on a swivel. But you can buy, they have a lot of those for sale as well, pre-made. Another question is, is there any good product to accelerate, to add to your compost to accelerate the process?
Yes. Actually, the Bokashi flakes are, since they're full of beneficial microbes, they will accelerate the compost. So how you would use them is when you are adding your green material, you would put a handful of the flakes in there. So those microbes will really kick up the decomposition of the green matter. To boost it even further, if you get organic matter that's been fermented, so organic matter that's in an anaerobic container and it's been sitting aside for 2 weeks, and you put that in your compost pile, it will really speed it up quite a bit. Other than that, I can't think of anything. Alma, can you think of anything?
No, not at the top of my head.
Yeah.
We have another questions, some of the top items that can't be put into compost / unusual items that can be. So he's asking dog hair or things like that.
Yeah, so pretty much anything, there's a couple of rules. One is anything that comes out of the ground can go back in. But some other things that you can do, as long as it's compostable, like paper, as long as it's not waxy or glossy, you can put it in. Cardboard, again, the smaller the particles, the faster it'll decompose. You can put in all kinds of hair, your hair, dog hair. You can put in lint from your dryer. You can put those in any kind of a composting method, whether it's hot composting, cold composting, or Bokashi. All of those things can go in.
What about manure and pet waste and?
Yes, you would not you could put manure into a compost pile. It's very, very high in nitrogen, so you wouldn't want to put it a lot in. And also, depending on where you get it, how they feed the animals. If they're, being fed organic matter that's not been treated, then you won't be introducing chemicals with the manure. Also, you may have seeds in the manure. So if you use it, just make sure you get the heat up to 140, 170 degrees Fahrenheit. As far as pet waste, you can do that with Bokashi. You can ferment it. And it's supposed to take care of all the pathogens. However, we've never done that. So what we tell people is, yes, you can do it. Just to be extra safe, you would probably want to put that in a flower bed instead of in a bed where you're growing vegetables or things to eat.
JT wants to know, do you add brown carbon waste using the Bokashi method or just food waste?
You can add both. Basically, it's food waste, but as Alma mentioned earlier, putting paper in, which is a carbon source, will help a little bit. You don't have to put a carbon source in, but you can. You just would want to limit it to probably, I would say, about 10 to 15% of all of the material you put in your container.
Should we refrain from adding oak leaves into our compost bins?
Well, there's a couple of things about oak leaves. They make incredible mulch, and when they break down, they are real rich soil amendment. However, they take a long time to decompose. So I put oak leaves into mine. It depends on how fine you want the finished product to be. So if you have oak leaves in it, at the end of, let's say you have the 3 bin method, at the end of the process, if you've been turning it properly and everything's as it should be, at 4-6 months when it's finished, you may still see some of the oak leaves. However, that's not a problem when you put it into your garden. So it just depends on how fine you want the compost, how much, the volume of the leaves. Again, they're a carbon source, so you would not want them to be more than a third of what you're putting into 3/4 of what you're putting into your bin.
Kind of generally, with Bokashi and the trench composting, how deep should you bury that?
Really, it does not have to be that deep. With the trench composting, you want to, it depends on how much you put in. You want to dig it deep enough so that once you've put in all of your food waste, you can cover it, 3 to 4 inches. And with the Bokashi, when you empty the bucket into the trench, it really spreads out to very, it's not very thick. So when we've done that with community gardens in their raised beds, we have them dig it out, a trench down the middle of the bed, about 12 inches, and then we spread out the compost and the dirt that's, that they shoveled out to build the trench. You just put that on top, and that's really all you need.
How do you know when your compost is finished, and what's the best way to store it to maintain like the microbes that you've grown?
Well, you'll know when your compost is finished when you don't see food waste. However, if you do see some food waste and you put it in the ground, it'll just continue to decompose. So that's not a problem. But you probably don't want to put a lot if you're using a cold composting method or a hot one. The Bokashi, I think we touched on that earlier. How do you store it? That's a good question. The microbes will stay alive as long as they have something to eat and some moisture. So you want to store it where it won't dry out. So you probably want to keep it damp. Again, you don't want to soak it. You just want it to where it's like a sponge that's been squeezed. All the water's been squeezed out. And you may want to cover it. If you're going to store it for a long time, I would cover it with, you could cover it with cardboard or tarps, just depending on the size of your pile. But the microbes will stay alive as long as they have something to feed off of and moisture.
Yeah, I would include the tarp as an essential equipment with the three bin compost and the Berkeley method, just to maintain more moisture inside as well. So Carrie is asking, what if we add a thicker layer of finished compost over our gardens? Is it better, and does it need to have need to be like incorporated or turned into the soil. So yeah.
I'm not really sure what you mean by a thicker layer, but if you can add your compost right to the top of your garden and spread it out. You do not have to, in fact, you don't have to turn it into the garden. In fact, the less you disturb the soil, the better it is for the soil. When you disturb the soil, it will disrupt all the life that's going on in the soil. So you would just spread it on top of your garden and, let it soak in.
This would be an optional step, but Silva at Talking Tree Farm uses a broad fork. So he'll layer the bed with compost before he plants in it, and then uses the broad fork or a pitchfork to aerate it. So he's just stabbing the tool into the soil, moving it back and forth, and then lifting it up. So you're not necessarily like turning it to expose them to sun, but you're just creating more air pockets for the compost to seep in and air to be in the soil.
Yeah.
So they're wanting to know how you can secure the Bokashi starter, how you can get the Bokashi starter.
Oh, well, if you're in San Antonio, you can get it from us. You go to our website, compostqueenstx.com. We do not sell it online yet because we aren't mailing it out. We haven't figured that out yet. We're working on it. You can make it yourself, which if anyone's interested in that, let us know and we'll post instructions for that. You can buy it online if you just Google Bokashi. It's usually called Bokashi brand because they use wheat bran for the most part. You'll be able to find it pretty easily.
I think that's it. Unless anybody has anything else to add. Or any other questions? So after this, we're going to go ahead and send y'all a copy of a slideshow, a Google survey that would be amazing to fill out because we want to continue doing these sorts of webinars. So any feedback would be really greatly appreciated. And we will also be sending a recording of the webinar so you can reference it as needed. Betsy, you want to?
Well, thank you guys for joining us, and happy composting. We're so excited that y'all are going to start putting your food waste back in the ground, and have a great weekend. Bye.